Hello, my name is Daniel Adjevich. I work at AppDynamics Professional Services practice as a solution architect, and I'd like to talk to you today about AppDynamics DEXTER. DEXTER is a utility that I made. It stands for Data Extraction and Enhanced Reporting. It provides the ability to extract a variety of interesting things from AppDynamics, reformat them for reporting, and put them into interesting, novel ways of reporting through it. It works by letting data that is sent to the AppDynamics controllers by agents flow freely into a variety of CSV files, which are then loaded into the reports, Power BI, Excel, Tableau, and others as well. Today, I'm going to speak about a configuration report. First, let's take a look inside of AppDynamics, what it looks like when we have to configure a few things. AppDynamics is a very rich platform. Within AppDynamics Application Performance Monitoring, we have an area called Instrumentation. It comes with, I don't know, about roughly 10 different tabs where you can configure interesting things like transaction detection. Should be opening up on my screen. Various rules involved in here. You can go and modify them as you're going along. You can go maybe enter data collectors as they have been modified in here. A variety of pop-ups exist. There's plenty of screens. The platform offers similar levels of configuration in our user experience module, which if you were to drill in a little bit deeper, will also offer configuration button for instrumentation, and a variety of interesting rules are present here as well. Sometimes there's a need to perform a deep inventory of all the configuration that is possible. And to do this, AppDynamics DEXTER offers something called a configuration report. Let's take a look at one of those. I can open up the configuration report Excel spreadsheet, and I'm presented with a table of contents on the second area. Here should be, there it goes, that you could see incorporates information about the controller settings, email alert templates, and all the HTTP alert templates are configured in here. Variety of the health rules and all the policies and actions associated with them, with any and all applications that are involved. And then configuration for APM in rows 17 through 40. Configurations for database, such as collector definitions, custom metrics, etc. Web and mobile monitoring in rows 44 through 48. And finally, configuration differences, which we will cover in the latter portion of this presentation. So each one of this is hot linked. So for instance, right off, let's take a look at the controller settings. If you click on this table, you are presented with a specific settings that you can find out and interrogate. And here I can maybe see what is my setting for the buffer of some sorts. How about this? The metrics buffer size. And here kind of have a modest size 50 megabytes, that is. Frequently, I use this report to find out where the settings have deviated from their common settings, that the standard in the platform. So let's take a look at, for instance, an agent properties. The agent properties are stored in the sheet 30.apm agent properties, but there's also a pivot table, one of my favorite features in Excel. Pivot table lets me see the settings in kind of a more visual grouped way. Here I have a filter that says, is the agent property setting default? When I change the selector to false, show me all non-default settings. I am now presented with a list of which agent properties in various applications deviate from their standard settings. If I take a look, how about this? We will remove the filter away, the Analytics Dynamics Service enabled, and this one as well. How about filter, hide selected items? So now I see that my AppDynamics e-commerce application on Demo 1 has a few extra properties. There's a GDBC DBCam integration enabled, the boolean probably is set to true, and a couple of slow request monitor intervals and threshold settings are set. Notice that the same properties aren't set in my other environment, only one of the controllers. That if I wanted to find out the specific values of what those properties are, I can go to the table underpinning these values, find out the same thing, show me where everything is non-default, and go find out my slow request threshold. What is it set to right now? So it's integer default value is 500, but it's actually set to 3600, so 3600. Other things that you can interrogate looking at the table of contents include things like entry rules and scopes. Let's take a look at Business Transaction Entry Rules 2.0 settings. There's a table that incorporates all the different things. There's a pivot associated with it that shows me all the rules that are present in the systems. I can look and find out exactly which rules exist where. So for instance, if I just look at my AD DevOps application, I could see, actually, how about we look at AD Financial? I could see the AD Financial application has a variety of the default built-in rules, but there's one right here, V2 Syncs BT, that jumps out, as well as a few subsequent ones that are clearly custom rules for them. If I wanted to find out what they're set to, I can use the table again and interrogate their settings for the match and actions. Going back to table of contents, a third thing that I like to show you are perhaps configurations associated with the custom exit rules. That's another common area of instrumentation that doesn't exist in a regular application. You have to actually add them manually. Looking at the pivots associated with this, I can see that we have a cache put, Couchbase, and MySQL present in AD DevOps offers. In fact, it's present in both of them right there. If I wanted to find out what they're set to, I can go back to the table underpinning this pivot and find out, okay, so how about this? This Java mail send is really represented by the class and method configuration. Something I could see in the UI, but I certainly would spend a lot more time clicking around through 2 controllers and 4 different applications. Here they're all on the same screen. Now that we saw the inventory of the rules, let's also discuss how configuration differences portions of the report can show us where it goes away from the configured baseline. In this report, I performed a configuration comparison against a reference application. So right here on my screen, I chose something called a reference application. The reference application is an APM application that's completely blank. It's devoid of anything except built-in out-of-the-box components. When you compare an application that has some configuration against the blank application, you see all the things that you may have done as an AppDynamics user to achieve the configuration that you want. Let's take a look at the pivot that underpins such configuration. The pivot here groups and areas, let's actually zoom in a little bit here, groups types of configuration on the left against the differences, extra or missing properties for each one of the elements. And it repeats the same comparison for as many applications as you decided to pull out. In my case, I have 20. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to filter right down to just the e-commerce application and see what the difference looks like. So within this, I have so my e-commerce application has some things that are different. Let's take a look. A BT entry rule. There is a BT entry rule that is different. Let's see. There is a Python app agent, and there is a value for Python app agent for Python static content entry rule that differs between my reference application and the application that I'm comparing it to, such as e-commerce. In fact, it's different in both places here. Match URI, filter value. If I wanted to actually see the value of differences, I can switch back to the table. So let's take a look at the BT entry rule. I'm going to find out that the entry rule is BT entry rule. And actually, I'm going to filter away BT entry rule 2.0 away. And if I look at my e-commerce application, just looking at the e-commerce, and look at only the differences, I should be able to observe those things. I have a match URI filter value that is usually this, but now is that. So there's a tiny difference with prefix. Perhaps you can observe it by zooming in a little bit deeper into here and seeing it right here. All right. So let's find out other configurations things in here. If I take a look at my BT entry rules, we have some things that are missing. So within BT entry rules, I have an application server, and I have a whole bunch of objects, this cron4j, built-in rules that are usually in our blank application that have been deleted. They're missing from both of these applications. That's actually not that bad, but it's an interesting departure from the standard norms. And let's finally drill into how about we take a look at the backend rules. Again, backend rules come in different shapes. We have a Java application, so we're going to filter on the app agent, which represents our Java application. And we can see all the differences associated here. Default Amazon SNS configuration has slightly different backend identity identification. Our default HTTP configuration is quite different, as well as oftentimes missing. All of this can take me as an AppDynamics expert for an exploration to find out why those things are different and why did they depart from the standards. Now that we looked at what happens when you compare against a blank application, let's actually look at the different use case where the configuration is compared against a template application. I have a slightly different report here. So if I open that up, in my differences report, going to table of contents and looking at configuration differences, I actually compared two controllers, Demo1 controller and Demo2 controller. For both of those applications really ought to be identical, but yet they're not. Let's see where they actually differ. Let's see if I collapse this again. I have a slightly smaller configuration parameters. I could have a Demo1 being my golden template and Demo2 being the one that is compared to them. Right? I mean, immediately I could see some changes in controller settings. If I expand this out, I could see certain things are just different or altogether. So there are certain things that you would expect to be different between the controllers, but there's actually a schema version is different. That's very interesting. There's some anomaly detection settings that are missing or actually extra in the controller number 2, but not in number 1. So that could be fun to investigate. And what else do we have here? How about the BTD entry rules right here? Those should be identical. But we have for App Agent, there are actually a whole bunch of entry rules that are in Demo 1 e-commerce, but not in Demo 2 e-commerce, which is why they're showing up as an extra columns. Very, very peculiar. Let's find something that's actually different. Let's say if we filter just differences, and this time we look at, health rules. How about comparing the health rules? So health rule, business transaction health rule, business transaction response time, much different. We have various criteria that are different in some shape or form. Let's go and investigate those differences right away. If I bring up the health rules and find out, there they are actually, all of them are different right here. You can see the criteria 1 is called call per minute on the demo controller 1, and it's calls per minute in demo controller 2. Obviously, that's a very minor difference, but it's there nevertheless, and it's very curious until we actually get to the values. So we have a warning value on the controller number 1, it's 25 calls per minute. On the controller number 2, it's actually 45 calls a minute. Certainly a discrepancy that if it wasn't supposed to be there would be fairly difficult to discover, and we can correct it this way. I hope you enjoyed the configuration comparison report. Thank you for listening.